Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you for the opportunity. And thanks, Tracey, for agreeing to be part of it. I don't want to do a long introduction for Tracey, just to say that she is, as far as we know, no relation. So please don't let that be one of the questions. I first, I've been aware of Tracey's work for a while, etc., but I had the opportunity to attend a seminar being held in Cape Town for her retrospective Shooting Down Babylon. And that really just opened up some ideas in my head about her and the work that she does. So I'm very pleased that she has agreed to do this. And she's probably one of our most formidable and indelible artists, and has really left a mark on the art scene in South Africa and internationally. And so with not too much further introduction, Tracey, thank you very much. Thanks for agreeing to being here. And I think I'd really like to just start off the conversation by asking you, why do you do art? You're muted.
Yeah, Tracey, just unmute yourself. You can try.
Vanessa, you can.
Yes, I did. Tracey, you must also just on your side. There we go.
Got it. Okay, I'm on. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Oh, what was the question? There was a bit of drama. I just lost the question. Repeat the question, please, Andre. You're muted. There we go. You're still muted.
Andre, there you go.
So I'm just curious to understand, like, why you do art. What's the motivation?
Okay. Oh yeah, that's a big question, right? Oh, that's a big question. Where do I begin? I know you sent me the questions before, and when I looked at that, I got a bit panicked because I was trying to figure out how to simplify it into something sort of bite-sized, which is near impossible to do. And I mean, I suppose the most honest answer would probably be that I can't help myself. It's kind of a little bit more complex than calling it a talent or a gift or whatever. It's semi-cursed in a sense. I've described it as being as kind of being the situation where I was like suicidal until the age of 33, and long story why I stopped being suicidal. Not really long, but short. I'll tell you in a minute. But it was like every time I was thinking about coming up a way of like trying to commit suicide, I was trying to figure out the quickest and most painless method. And the day I decided I was going to do it, I'd get an idea for a work. And the work doesn't actually come from me. That's the thing. And I just watched something recently that confirmed what I've been sort of going on about, trying to decipher or understand what this is. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was a guy called Billy Carson. Yeah, I think it was Billy Carson. And he was explaining that you don't actually, he's like, there's no new ideas. If it was him, there's no new ideas. Everything that you think of as an idea actually exists as a frequency. So all you are is sensitive to that, and you just pick it up. And and I think people who are empathetic and who have the it's not really a desire or an impetus, maybe it's a need, to kind of create, whether you doing whatever kind of art form, music, dance, film, whatever it is. I think all kind of have that, and it's just kind of like a deeper sensitivity to something that's bigger than you. So I kind of like, I'm just sort of the mediator, vessel, maker of the work. I don't I don't feel the desire to take complete credit for it. I mean, it's exhausting to actually make it. So I mean, you know, I'd say, okay, I make the fucking work, but I mean, in terms of where it comes from, I feel like it's a higher space. And I kind of recently been sort of thinking about how do we go back to the cave where we would, dancing and painting and making music, and there was no sort of economic incentive to do that. Like what was the desire? And that to me is, I feel, is the space that incentivizes me to make work, or, compels me, or initiates it, or forces me. And just a footnote, by the way, when I decided not to commit suicide any longer, was because a friend of mine put me in contact with a psychic who was like, oh, you're suicidal. And I was like, yeah, but isn't everybody? And she was like, well, if you kill yourself, she's like, no, not everybody. I was like, oh, really? And then she was like, well, if you kill yourself, you're just going to come back and it's not going to be as good. And I was like, there's no fucking way I'm coming back to this planet. I want to do a really good job this time so I don't have to return. This place is work, yo. It's like, let me rather be space dust, I want like minimum effort in the next round. And so, and I think, thinking about work, as art is not just merely being an object, not merely being like material and matter, and knowing that it's for good, or I mean, it can be used for negative. I mean, Hitler was a failed artist. He used his creative energies for evil. But artists are capable of doing both extremes. And and I'm a mom now, so also I've got even a more kind of a big incentive to commit to this planet and sort of, contributing to it in a way that shifts it. And, not that I think anybody can do anything about the current state of it now, that boys are getting out their bombs and trying to blow it up again. But anyway, does that answer your question?
Well, that opens up a whole lot of doors for interesting discussion. I mean, I think what it makes me think about is that, life is complex, life is difficult, art reflects life, life reflects art. And there's a lot of complexity to your art. There's a lot of nuances to it. There's a lot of thought-provoking elements to it. There's a certain timelessness to it. And so, and you mentioned a little bit about how you try and, find the frequency and try and connect with what it is that you're trying to make. So in light of all this complexity and all these layers and the what's happening in the world, how do you even start to channel that or focus it or to bring about the conceptual idea and then translate it into something materially?
Okay, firstly, art is life. It's not reflecting whatever. It's life. It's I don't know how the two can be separate. I just want to put my camera's a bit soft focus. Give me a second. I don't separate the two. It's not like it's a job I go to. It's 24/7, 360. It never ends. That's why it drives one fucking crazy. It's really it's unrelenting. And oh shit, what was that? What was the part of the question? There was like you asked me about you started with that and then you were like the motivation. Did you say the motivation?
Yeah, well, so in light of all of these complexities, how do you even begin to tune in to conceptualize the idea and then to translate it materially?
Okay, yeah, so in terms of just kind of containing it, there's sort of like a number of approaches or kind of methods and methodologies that I use. So the one would be like, how do I reconfigure emotion? Intense emotion into something visual, like how do I the other is sometimes site specificity will determine what the work is. So a lot of the time, because I never have money to make work, I'm always hustling and trying to figure out, like, you know, how to get institutions to fund a new artwork. I have to kind of like pitch, and it's like really kind of pitching. I mean, that's kind of more sort of like corporate or like advertising kind of terms and practice. So I mean, like, artists don't tend to kind of want to associate themselves with that too much. So yeah, so I would like normally just be like incredibly manipulative, and just say that I want to make a new piece because, you know, the concept of the show is great, or I just, you know, I have a desire to make a new work that that somehow also kind of fits into the concept of the show, and and then that starts to kind of shape the work. And like, it's kind of crazy because I did this experiment years ago. It would take me like 2 years to from like conception to execution, and then there's like this sort of violence in the way that we speak about the process of art making, right? I mean, we conceive a work and then you execute it, and so there's something weirdly kind of pro-choice irony in there. Anyway, and so I would take like 2 years to really think about the work the minute I got the idea, and then I would just like I would just, you know, chew the life out of it, and just interrogate it from absolutely every angle, and until it was dust, and then I would remake the work, and kind of the interrogation of the work is because the nature of the conceptual process is that, because you're dealing with stuff, with like matter, with things that are already loaded, it's like, how do you understand what sort of alchemaically what each of these things do, whether it's a gesture, whether it's location, whether it's a piece of fabric, whether it's, you know, just whatever the material is that's making the work, and then like, what is the most effective way? And then you kind of, and then it's like kind of militaristically thinking about, okay, so how strategically can I position the work? And I used to be like really, I used to be fucking crazy and really quite like meticulous and pedantic and dogmatic about exhibitions. I'd be like, okay, I want a list of all the artists on the show, and I'd go and research. And, you know, back then when I was doing this was like pre-internet, so I would like, you know, have to go and find periodicals and go to the library or whatever. And so and I, you know, and then I'd figure out, like, you know, who's on the exhibition and how to make. Yeah, you know, it was ego would come into it. I wanted to have the best work on the show and fuck everybody else out. And so, you know, that would also kind of be a driving factor. And yeah, and then there was the sort of first work that was kind of like one of the turning points with this was when I kind of clocked on, and I had a sort of conscious recognition of my process. Was around 1999, 2000. So I had been working on TKO, which was a boxing video. And I initially, when I thought of making the work, I wanted to beat up a curator, Swedish curator, who was putting on this awful like apartheid show. And there was like all of these, like there was this glut of apartheid exhibitions that were happening in the 90s. And it was predominantly white South African artists that were on the exhibitions, which is like highly fucking problematic. And, you know, and there was still, I mean, which is kind of what they still do. I mean, they're still sort of speaking on an experience that isn't theirs. And yet because they were articulate and they understood like the kind of global sort of framework, and a lot of them had also changed their allegiances in the way that they were speaking and the manner that they were practicing, they were getting onto all of these exhibitions. And so the guy was actually, when I met him, he was actually quite sweet, the curator, but like I was infuriated. Like I thought the show had a crap title. I thought I didn't respect any of the South African artists that were on it. And I wanted to beat him up as an artwork, because he was like, oh, you can do whatever you want, you know, if you want to do a performance, it's great. I thought, yeah, I'll give you a fucking performance, you know. And then I was like, actually, I don't know how to box. And so at the time, Storm from Rensburg and I were really good friends, and he was working at the Market Theatre Gallery, and we were driving, and I told him about the work and you know, how I want to do sort of, you know, beat up this curator, and I think I need to go and study boxing now in order to do it. And I think it was like 24 or something when you know, when I sort of came up with this piece. Anyway, so Storm and I are driving downtown. I'm driving him home. He lived in Yeovil. And as we're driving past like near Nugget Street, we see this guy like leaning out the window, like big muscles, blonde hair, and like peering out of the window. And we look up and it says, Durant's Gym, the factory of champions. And Storm's like, oh my God, sweetie, there's a gym. Why don't you go inside? So we pulled off and run upstairs, and I'm like, and it turns out it's Nick Durant. So I'm running and I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm this artist, I'm gonna do this work, and I really need to train to be a boxer because I want to do this performance. And he was looking at me like I was just like, you know, like weird. And then he's like, okay, come tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, must I bring anything? Gloves? And he's like, no, I got everything, whatever. So I pitch up the next day. And so I started training for like 4 years solid. I wanted to turn professional. I was like so hooked. And I've never beaten up anybody, and quite honestly, I know I can't take a punch. I'm all mouth, but like yeah, and so I ended up making TKO. I didn't end up doing the show because it was just awful. It wasn't worth it. And the guy was really sweet when I found out afterwards. I think I told him eventually what I was going to do. But I ended up taking about 2 years to create TKO, and the work evolved from beating up a curator to having 4 spy cameras embedded in a boxing bag, and I beat it up until I had this sort of orgasm, which kind of happened to me when I was training. I was like, anyway, so kind of knowing like that process, and then I was like, okay, so I conceptualized this work, and I'd looked at it from all angles, and you know, that time I was like really into minimalism. And I was, and most especially sort of 60s minimalism. So I was looking at, you know, the white cube and the space and the kind of simple lines and monochrome, and also kind of like the violence of the museum gallery space. So I'm also like, how can I kind of like fuck with that? And then also I was like, you know, frustrated because I wanted to paint, and, you know, I couldn't paint because I needed a studio. I didn't have a studio, and it was like, you know, painting is actually quite an expensive endeavor. And like I said, I never had any money. So, you know, performance art is actually also like the cheaper option, because what you have is your body, and most of the time, you know, you don't even need clothes if you're doing it. So, I mean, these are all kind of like deciding factors, you know. It's not, you know, it's kind of like, you know, like how do you kind of like also like this internal gauge of like, okay, is this a compromise? Does this feel good? And it's kind of like intuiting like what, you know, what the line would be between like what is, you know, what the work wants, and then eventually the work just becomes itself, you know. But anyway, so embedded the 4 cameras, and you know, and then we'd also construct, and I ended up doing it in Texas. In San Antonio, where I was in an art residency program, which was really amazing. Yeah, I kept running away from the work because it was initially what I proposed, and then I was there for 3 months, and then I started doing a whole bunch of other things. I joined the local gym, the San Fernando gym there, kind of went for training. Americans train far more rigorously than we did. So I didn't, you know, do that. And then I ended up trying to do another work, which was on the New York subways, and it was like a whole bunch of different things. And then like 2 weeks before the opening, I made the work, and it just kind of spilled out of me. And I was like, everything just kind of worked out perfectly. It was like all the rigor that had gone into like conceptualizing it and like just analyzing it, interrogating it, all of that just, you know, just kind of came out. And it wasn't like I had to do much. It just kind of magically made itself. And I find that like it's also like part of the process. It's almost like, and I think if you speak to most artists of in other art forms, they'll tell you that it's like there's this moment where the work is right, and it's almost as though the stars align and everything in the cosmos is just right, and it just comes out. It's like, you know, and you can't force it. I mean, you can try, but it's always unsuccessful, and maybe part of the process is forcing it. I'm actually battling with that at the moment. And then I was like saying to one of my students, or my son or something, I'm like, I should have clocked this by now. Like, what is my process? I keep forgetting, because every time I do it, I think I'm not going to go through the same kind of like the traumas of the interrogation, because at some point at least the traumas aren't as personal as they used to be, or the interrogation, because I think that that's something that a lot of people also suffer from, is that you associate yourself so much with the work that you actually forget that you're not the work. So when you start interrogating the work, you start to character assassinate yourself. And that's like the trick, is like to where you stop and where the work begins, you know? I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
No, definitely. I mean, it certainly informs that, bringing the process and the materiality together. And which makes me think is that, I sort of had to disagree with you about the box, because you've certainly done a punch to the art in it. And I think that shouting down Babylon is such a punch. It's, if I can maybe share some images. Here we go. I trust that it is showing.
No, it's almost showing.
Andre?
Almost showing.
There we go. It's showing now.
Okay. So for me, like shooting down Babylon was just, to be honest, like just an overwhelming experience. It's that I left there after the weekend feeling quite exhausted. And I was like, what a formidable body of work, and just so much to process. And it's like certainly warrants, more than one visit. But so I'll do a little bit of free advertising for you, Tracey. If anybody's interested, this is the book, and please go and buy it. It is filled with gems, and every art student should have a copy of it. But what did shooting down Babylon mean for you? What did it do for you? I have some thoughts around that, but I'll come to them later.
I don't know. Hey, I'm still kind of processing it. Yeah, I think I'm still kind of processing it. I mean, the thing is, like, also, the show happened, and then I came up to Joburg, and I went back to teaching, and it's almost like I was in a different planet, like solar system altogether. Because when I got back to Joburg, there was like nothing even happened in Cape Town, And so, and so it was kind of weird. It was like this thing was happening, and I actually, even publicity-wise, I actually hadn't really heard anything. But then eventually I took a ride down to Cape Town with my mom and my son, because my dad passed away in May, and we were going to all go down together. So three of us just went, and it was just such a nice trip, just to kind of like enjoy it for myself, like just as an audience member, not as, and for her to see it, because she was like such a vital part with everything. I mean, my mom was, both my folks, they really supported this, I mean, it's, so, I'm fucking tired, Joe. I want to be a farmer. I think I need like a 5-year break. I want to go and like plant some seeds, man. Like really, like, and also it's just like kind of, I think I was a bit disillusioned, like that when coming back to Joburg, I was just like, so now what is that all for? Because also my students hadn't seen the work, and it was just a whole bunch of things that were just kind of not as fluid, and it had nothing to do with the exhibition, but it was sort of outside, that. And it was, and it's kind of like, I don't make easy art. I don't make comfortable art. I don't make pretty fucking art. Even though I do think that my work is quite beautiful, I don't, subscribe to just, and I can't. I would really love to just make stuff without having to be not so much responsible for it, but like kind of, I just find people who just use their talent in a very kind of simple way, have it so much easier. People aren't ready for this type of work that has, hard content. So it's harder to survive with it, which is one of the reasons I have a teaching job, that's kind of the reality also of making art, you know. And also, I mean, there's a whole range of other things that we can talk about, but I just, you know, they just start to sound like whiny and petty and, you know, whatever, you know, like painters have it really easy for one. Yeah, you know, males generally have it easy as well. You know, there's like a whole, these kind of sort of cliches of kind of exclusion. Yeah, and I started reading the monograph, and I only got through like 3 essays, but I could not put it down. It was just so lovely and just so lush. And I just think it's such a beautiful gift, you know, to the world. I'm so glad I was a conduit for it. You know, I mean, that's the other thing. It's just like knowing that actually, I mean, I think about the madness that went around making every single work and what a struggle it was to get each work perfect. You know, it's like even this photograph of Venus Bartman. I mean, you know, it's seemingly an easy image to look at, and you'd say, oh, it's layered and whatever. But I mean, it's like, you know, production wise, it was hardcore. You know, it was like, we went to the Cradle of Humankind. I went with a friend of mine who was assisting me, who also is like, he features also in a lot of my work as well, which is also the other thing that I do. You know, it's like, I have this like posse of people who, you know, they're my friends and my family. They, you know, they people I work with who are just also just like, you know, incredibly connected and just like, you know, empathetic and, you know, into it, and, you know, and kind of have the same sort of sensibility that I do towards art making, you know, or the arts, you know. So anyway, so it's Chris Martin, Cleopatra. He plays Cleopatra in Cleopatra as a Black Bitch. So Chris was and actually we shot it there. That's actually the part of near the location where we shot the Cleopatra video. But anyway, so you know, and then having to paint, I think I painted myself at home, and then I think it's like an hour and a half drive to what is this location again? The Cradle. And then you know, we went on a game drive. We didn't tell the guy who was the guide who was taking us, the ranger. God, what are they called? The ranger. And he was taking us on the drive, and then we were like, okay, stop here. And yeah, you know, the space is it's all protected. You can't really just jump out and go and do your thing. And somehow we managed, I mean, it's a lot of manipulation, you know. We managed to like convince him that we wanted to go down there, found the spot, and like the 2 hills are kind of like, if you see the full photograph, there's like 2 hills, they look like breasts. They kind of, you know, that are in the background. So I wanted that location. And then I've got like Cleo screaming. I'm like, you know, my photographer was Andrew Maincheese, and he was murdered like a few years, about 15 years ago, downtown Joburg. They tried to rob him and shot him 5 times in the back. And he was the photographer who worked with me on this series, on this miscast series. And yeah, and so we were like standing in the grass, and Cleo's shouting like, stick out your bum, turn your body, yes, no, put your bum out more, move down, that's perfect, you know. So it was, you know, this was like, actually, out of all the shots, this was the one. All the other ones were a mess. And this was exactly what I had in my mind, you know. And you know, to also just like to speak to somebody that's also like in your brain and has some of your vision, you know, and they can actually kind of like you know, see you through it. Yeah, and then, you know, then there's the photoshopping process that happens afterwards, which for me was like neo painting, you know, like post painting, like how you get into Photoshop and you start to like manipulate color and light, and, you know, and then there's like, and if you can see in the clouds, like that's supposed to be like the godhead, there's like a figure, there's like a face in the clouds. That was also tampered with, you know, so it could, you know, be bumped up the cloud. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that really stood out for me at the seminar, you know, for Shooting Down Babylon, was the incredible sense of community that I got from yourself and the people who were there, either the people who were, you know, talking to the exhibition, or people like Storm and the curator, and there was just an obvious sense of that this wasn't just your art community, but was almost your family. And you mentioned something a little bit earlier about the importance of your parents in your art making process. So how important is that you have this sense of family and community in making art?
I know it's incredibly important. I mean, I was sent to a private school like in 1980 or so. I was like that experiment, the guinea pig, because there's a kind of a story around it where my dad was in the States and he heard, I think it was Archbishop Hurley say that our schools were integrated. Well, no, he didn't say they were integrated. He implied that they were. He said that the Catholic schools, my parents are Catholic. I'm kind of a recovering Catholic. I shouldn't say that because I'm going to church now. But so I was he said there's no racism in the Catholic schools. There is no racism. There's colored Catholic schools, black Catholic schools, white, something like that. He didn't say that they weren't integrated. And so when he came back from the States, my dad called him out on it. Basically, I like the story that says, and my father denied this when I told him, because this was the story I remember hearing in this way, was that he wrote a letter to the bishop saying that the Catholic Church was being antichrist because they practiced racism. And I was kicked out of the colored Catholic school because I was too young. So and then the next day, like the next week or whatever, I was taken to this all-white Catholic school, which was like fucking nightmare for 3 years. My understanding with my parents, was they were both trade unionists, was that you're getting this education not for yourself, but you're getting it so that you can come back and teach others. And that is what I understood for my entire primary and secondary education. Apartheid only ended when I was in my second year at Boston. Well, we had it ended when I finished high school, so in 91. But I mean, it was like, democracy was when I was in the second year, was when we voted, right? Of fine art. But that was my understanding, was that because we didn't know when it was going to end. And, my folks were like, we're giving you this good education and it's not for yourself. It's so that you can, it's not for yourself. And that was the understanding. I mean, most of my friends who, when eventually, I went to another school, in Johannesburg, which is far more progressive than Durban, they had a similar understanding because a lot of their parents were also politically active. And so, for me, that sensibility has always been connected to my work. It's like, okay, so when I make work, also I know that arts education is not freely available for everybody. And so many people I know, a lot of my friends, artists are generally freaks. So, all my friends are pretty much freaks that are like societal rejects, and they fucking amazing. They incredibly creative. They genius, And so and so I was like, part of what I wanted to do was kind of also, because the South African art scene was incredibly white, I mean, still is white dominated, white controlled, whatever, but it was just like the body of artists were also just, it was just very incredibly oppressive, kind of talking to anyway. And if you weren't making a particular type of work and whatever, and it was also, I needed a posse to kind of fight this fucking machine. And so part of it was like getting my people together so that, when I go into battle to make the work, it's like, I'm not alone. And then also, the people that I met in the art world. So these are people outside of the art world that work with me, but also the people that I met in the art world that I connected with. We've known each other since we were kids, in our 20s, and sort of starting out and, and hustling and, starving and putting on shows, Storm and I curated a show at this for the second Johannesburg Biennale, and it was on the top of Africa, on the top of the Colton Center. It was called 50 Stories, and the idea was to have 50 artists. And Storm used his birthday money to to also put the show on. And we like hustled to get like, I think my mother borrowed us like 300 rand for something, but I mean, like, like we didn't have any funds. We got free printing, we got the venue for free, all the artists as well were just like, and we used all of at the time the second Joburg Biennale was opening, so all the international press that was here for the Biennale came to our show, so we had this massive opening as well. So it's like, because the thing is, like, I think we all kind of idealize, and we believe that our craft will make it a better world. I mean, as cheesy as that sounds, I think that that's really the basis of it. It's like the most basic thing. I just think of like all the incredible people I've worked with, and I just, and that's kind of like, the community is important. I mean, I've fallen out with people, I mean, that happens. I guess I've kind of come to terms with that, but not really, actually. I haven't come to terms with a lot of it, but anyway, it's like, it's like it was a necessity for me, because I think I'd applied to WITS at some point, or no, I was at WITS and then I kind of absconded. This place was just too hectic at the time. I was way too young, but I kind of wanted to start an art school. And Santomo for King and I were like talking in Sweden, and he said to me, like, let's start an art school, because he'd spoken to somebody, a South African lecturer, artist and lecturer, who said, when he said to her, oh, must be so great, like, teaching. She said, no, it's not, because you teach in your competition. And he was furious. He's like, what the fuck? Like, how can this person say that? He's like, this is an amazing gift. Like, how he's like, fuck these people, let's start our own art school. So that was our plan. We were going to start an art school, and I think, I mean, we were drinking heavily at the time as well. So, I mean, like that, it was kind of more fantasy as opposed to, and also the art hustle doesn't really give you the space, I mean, people think that you make a lot of money with art. You don't. You always kind of like, it's almost like if you're not having bread and butter money, if you're not kind of blue, there's a whole range of things. So, so that didn't kind of happen. But I'm teaching now at that institution. So, that's sort of a plus. And the idea is in that space, I was like, I'm going to give myself 4 to 5 years, or maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but I was like, I'm going to give myself 4 to 5 years there. And the idea is to just change the space of art in my country, my continent, and my planet, And I just think that the art world is just filled with a glut of shit at the moment. I don't think people are interrogating work enough. I think work is just empty. I don't even look at art anymore unless it's really some old school artist that I trust and respect, that knows their craft, that's, that's not going to disrespect the audience with their ego and their wank. So, and I'm really sad that all these incredible artists who mentored me, a lot of them have passed on, but also a lot of them haven't gotten the recognition they deserve, because they haven't sold out. And I mean, if you think my work is hardcore and radical, you should see the people who like educated me. Their work is like insane. And I try and bring that to students, but it's like we have this like really fucked up like secondary and primary education where there's like hardly any art stimulation. There's actually not even like, it's slave education still. Let's just fucking call it what it is. I mean, there's not enough there that incentivizes kids to actually want more, do more, think that they can be more, So then they get to university, you've got to kind of like fill all those gaps, and you got 4 years to do it, and a lot of, and it's fucking hard. I mean, I remember being like fucking depressed when I was studying. It was such a paradigm shift. I had no idea that the world functioned in the way that it did when I got to varsity. It was incredible. It was, and I mean, saying that I had like a white supremacist education, because that education at WITS was all about educating the generation that was going to be the masters of the universe and control the world, So I'm now in a space where I don't see art history being taught. And I'm furious because it's like, that is where the power lies. If you understood art history, you would know you wouldn't even have to fucking like open up another fucking history book, because it's all in there. It's all on, it's in every fucking image. I mean, before that was the, and you can see the way that control was like from the cave walls. I mean, this is art history. We've got art that goes back like 70,000 fucking years in this country, and we are not fucking appreciating what we have. Like, how fucked up is that? Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck is going on here?
Sure, interesting. We've got a question from, let me see, Volunteer regarding this. I don't know if you maybe want to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself, please.
Volunteer. Can see the question.
Yeah.
You want me to say it? Can you say it?
Well,
it'd be nice to hear your voice.
I think, Vanessa, if you can maybe unmute so that the participants can ask the question.
Yes, it is set that participants are able to unmute themselves. So maybe she can just try again.
Yeah, try again.
Okay, that works.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Maybe you can put your camera on if you don't mind.
I will do. Hold on a second. It might be a little dark. Let's see how it goes. Okay, hi. Hi, Tracey. Thank you so much for you got me kind of riled up in the last sort of thing that you were saying there. I'm an educator myself, and I think that you speak the truth in some ways, and that there's the passion of art making that exists within South Africa. So I'm looking this way because my camera is over here. The conflict that one has is that, can one still teach art in the way that one could have done? You mentioned art history. More and more, I see that my students are not necessarily wanting to sort of brave the gallery spaces rather than become creatives who can solve problems. And is there a space for the art teaching in the face of the art machine? Commodification, neoliberalism, and all the rest of it, and still have something to say when a lot of the space in which we see art as a deregulated or unregulated business, I suppose second only to drug trade. How do you face that? Where do you position yourself as an art teacher or a creative who has to guide people into the new space or this space as well in the face of all of this? I'm not saying that we're disillusioned around the art world. It's just a question of there's a lot more complexity to it now.
I should have written notes while you were talking. I kind of
well, basically the art machine. Let's talk about the art machine and talk about how, as an educator, what in the face of the art machine, I suppose.
I can just tell you something. Just to tell you, I hate that term, creatives. I think it's such like a commercial industry term. Like I don't like. I think if I went into advertising, sure, call me a creative. But like, I think artists are something else. It's like there was the vice chancellor at Wits. I think he's brilliant. I'm such a fangirl. I think he's like the most brilliant vice chancellor on the continent. Anyway, one of the things he was trying to do as artistic director or art director was to integrate the kids in the neighborhood into the work. And so the kids were helping him paint murals and like really being sort of involved in the art department. And he said after shooting had stopped, he went back there just to sort of check on the place and see some of the kids. And one of the boys had been involved in a gang rape. And he said to him, like, why did you do this? And he was saying to me, this kid was like so super talented and really smart. And he was like really disappointed and so like heartbroken that this had happened, And he said, why did you do this? And this boy said, I was bored. Like,
Yeah.
What the fuck? You know? I mean, that's kind of like, you know, I mean, this is like part of it. And if you go to the township, you go to any government school, and you see the lack of resources, and you see how our teachers are overworked. You see the lack of stimulation. You know, I was in Cameroon. I was like 2004, I think it was. It wasn't 2000. It was later. It was 2010, something. 9. Anyway, it was there's an amazing program that happens there, curatorial kind of program. It's a triennial, and it was started by Princess Marilyn Douala Bell. She's actual princess, it's not her first name. Her father's the king of the Douala people, and like her great grandfather was he was assassinated by the Germans. They accused him of, and they hung him outside the palace. And so the back of the palace is used as basically a Kunsthal, you know, so like an art space, an art gallery, it's not a museum, like it's more like, you know, this experimental space that's just so incredible. And her late husband Didier Schwab, he was he was sort of the director of it. I can't remember like what it was, but more in the production side. And I worked with some kids there. I did the story about Mami Wata and da, da, da. Anyway, the first time they send you over for like 10 days, like you do a recce the first 10 days. And the whole sort of theme of the triennial is water, because the Douala people are, I think Douala means water, and you know they're right on the Douala River. Anyway, so there's all these kind of water issues. I mean, Cameroon also just has this really fucking corrupt government and this president that will probably never leave, and he's been there for like 30 years. He's just completely atrocious. They call him the ghost president because he's actually never there. But anyway, the idea was you go there for 10 days and you respond to the place, and then you kind of propose a work and you come back and you create a new work. So for the first 10 days, you make a small piece where you kind of and I love this. It's a very kind of Francophonian approach, I think, to art making. You know, there's a lovely like little fluffy romantic quality. Not fluffy, it's just romantic, sublime quality to the way that the French approach art, which is very different to the way that the Anglophones approach it, which is quite hardcore and kind of rigid in some ways. Anyway, so you go there for 10 days and you respond to the place and you make a work, and then you come back, you know, for the triennial. And when you're there, you create a work that is within the themes of water. And so I decided to work with the kids from Nubel the first time, and we made this video about Mami Wata. And then the second time, we had been at a school my first visit, and the playground was just sand. It was just sand. There was nothing. There was fuck all. There was not even a blade of grass. It was just dust. It was dust. And the buildings were run down, and everything just looked shit. And we were all sitting there watching this documentary on the civil war in Cameroon that nobody ever talks about. But also what came up in this, which that I didn't know, was that there was one of the kings. There's a lot of like royal families in Cameroon. I can't get my head around it, but so somebody had decided some ruler, king, whatever, chief, and he created a whole new language or script or alphabet. Anyway, so that kind of came up. So I kind of learned about all of these kind of elements about Cameroon, and then I was talking to this poet, a Cameroonian poet, Lionel Manga, and he gave a speech where people were at some point people were laughing in the movie when they were, they were showing footage of people protesting and, and being beaten up, but savagely beaten up. And, it was like, it was like a snuff movie, basically. And so people were laughing. And then he when he finished, he said to them, I didn't know he was speaking in French, and somebody next to me was translating. And he said, everybody clapped who thought that was a funny film. And people just clapped automatically without even actually comprehending what he was saying. And then he started going into it, and he started criticizing. He's like, you don't respect children in this country. If you look at the way that we treat them, they're water bearers. They've got to carry these carriages of water, and it's like big, like barrels of water that these kids got to, and they, we beat our kids, and he started just laying into them. And it struck me like this school was really fucking depressing. I would never want to be here. And so I decided I was going to make a garden in the school. I haven't done that yet. I'm still go back and finish it. But what we started off doing was we created an environment where we just did these murals. I worked with a painting collective, like this group of young painters that started their own collective. And we did like this jungle scene on the one wall, and they plastered the wall. The walls weren't even plastered. They plastered the walls. This is like, it's called Douala Art, the Douala Art, the venue is called Douala Art. That was part of my proposal was, so they plastered the walls. And then the other side was, I got a list of the names of all of the endangered and extinct Cameroonian plants. And I had the scientific Latin names for all of these plants. And we got a sign writer in who painted them onto the walls. And then I heard from Marilyn a while later, she said like that school became so popular because a lot of the kids people wanted the kids to go there. But also they started drawing classes, because that was the thing. When we were busy painting on the walls, we turned around and these kids initially, they were throwing stones at each other and chasing each other with like empty water bottles, plastic water bottles. And then at one point we turn around and they're all like on the ground and they're using their fingers and they're copying the flowers and the drawings, the paintings from the wall, like in the sand. And I was like, yeah, that's the work. That is the artwork, that moment, So Marilyn told me that, they've started drawing classes or art classes at the school. And they also, the teachers are taking, every week, they take one of the scientific names of the plant off the wall and they learn about that plant. And I mean, sorry, that makes me so it's probably one of the best works I've ever done.
Yeah. That's awesome. Can I, we're almost out of time, but I really want to, in light of what you just shared, ask you to comment on this work, on just what is it that makes today's children so different, so appealing. And I'll just, share some of the images and stills that I have from it.
Oh yeah. Oh, this one's also a heavy one. So my dad had been doing community work in Riverlea Extension, which is located just next to the FNB Stadium. And I went there this is sort of how my relationship with the community sort of started, led to this, was he'd wanted me to just like photo document one of the environmental kind of projects that he did around Christmas time. So he dressed up he got this weird he got this Native American costume that he dressed up in for some reason. And they were hanging that collected all the garbage in the neighborhood, and then went to the park, they cleaned up the park, and then they hung all the garbage bags on the tree in the park, and it was around Christmas time. And then they did something, I can't remember like what, there was like some play they were busy that they did. And so he just asked me to come and like document it for him. And so I was there with my stills camera, my little shitty like camcorder, like trying to record it. And I couldn't handle all the equipment. And then, so there was these kids standing around and I said, I was like, do you guys want to like help me out? And they were like, sure. So I showed them how to use it. And, and then, yeah, and they were just amazing. I mean, they were just incredible. They just took to the equipment and they just, they did amazing work. And then it was like, I said, after the event had finished, we were winding down, and they were like, oh, please come back, and so I decided I needed to do something then. So I did one of the sort of part of the environmental work that my dad was doing was the mine dumps that surround this place. And it's like a village. I mean, a lot of the people that were in Sophia Town were moved to Riverlea Extension, and they call the place Zombie Town. And it was kind of like, stereotypical place, post apartheid, didn't have water and electricity, like, well, I think until probably like, actually when we moved, when I did this piece, around about in 2010, that's when people started getting electricity and running water and stuff. I think there was running water, but outside taps and things. Anyway, so I and one of the things that he was, my father was working with a nonprofit called For a Better Society, which he'd started in Durban and moved around. And when I was in high school, my friends and I had also joined it, and we got a sports ground and stuff built in Flare Off, where my friends stayed. Anyway, that's another story. But what happened was they were trying to get the mining companies to compensate the people who were all basically infected with respiratory diseases, and people walking around with like state-of-the-art like breathing apparatus, but they had no food in their homes. And there was a huge kind of cover up with the mining industry around this, because the place is surrounded by the mine dumps, and the sand is really toxic, and the water, there's also water that kind of comes into the place. And so so I decided I wanted to do something with the kids, and I didn't know at the time. I was like, I want to do this Bosch Bruegel kind of thing. I wanted to kind of do my whole fucking little like art ego move around it, which never ever actually works out. So because the work just needs to become what it needs to. But and the idea, and I worked with my friend Faisal Desai, and Faisal grew up in Westbury, which was part of the original Savai town. And he grew up quite hard. Like, his mother was I think she was the second wife. His dad was an imam. She was the second wife. They grew up in abject poverty, and he was the only boy in the sort of all-girl family. And he, and my ideas were going to go in there, and we were just going to make this video, like, do something for like a week or two. And then Faisal was like, no, we've got to get these kids food, we've got to get sponsorship, we got to get, so we were just like, hustling, getting like stuff for the kids and for the neighborhood. And then this piece that happened was probably what I'd secretly hoped my fantasy Bosch Bruegel more who's Bosch? I'll get confused. Piece would have been. I was actually trying to stop a fight between two groups of kids, because they came from different parts of the neighborhood, of like the village, basically. And the one kid, like I had this sort of this massive camera, and there was a group of kids shooting a soap opera in one of the rooms. So we were working in the school, and then the other kids were like outside, and so I was like, okay, so we need to do something to like stop this this like village warfare. And so they started like just making stuff up, and I just let the camera roll, and it was just this incredible kind of narrative starts to unfold. And it was just like, it's horrific, to say the least. You kind of, and then when I was thinking about it, because I was guilt tripping about this work, I was like, this is not something I can sell. This is not like a commodity. This is exactly the same type of kind of work ethic that I despise seeing other artists do, kind of using African poverty and children and all these things as a means to make work, to speak about it from a position of privilege and an advantage. And so I went to do an MA then the sort of soon afterwards, like probably the following year I went, the following year I went to Goldsmiths to do my master's. And the reason I did the master's was because I needed to work, and I couldn't get a university job without it. And I'd convinced my gallerist to pay for my it was Linda Gibbon. She was the original owner of the Goodman Gallery. And so when I was there, I was going to work on this and try and do something else with it. And I realized that actually in its entirety, it was perfect. But I needed to, give it a slip so that, there was a criticality about it that would like attack the consciousness, conscience. And so that was when the title came in. And the title was just what is it about today's children that make them so different, so appealing. And that came from the first pop art painting that was done by a British artist, Richard Hamilton, and it showed like a guy like lifting weights in the corner, and there was like a moon in the background, lady, and I showed it to my my seminar group at Goldsmiths, and one of the most sort of insightful guy in my class was this Greek guy, Theo. And Theo, when he looked at it, I mean, he was the only person that was really kind of sort of on top of his sort of post-colonial studies and game and shit. And he was like, when I look at this work, I'm like, so what are you doing? Are you comparing African children to fridges and to commodities? And it was just this incredible reading that just like compounded the fact that this was an important moment. It was with all of its ethical issues, with all of its problematics. That's exactly what I needed to claim ownership of and say, exactly, this is a fucking problem. This can't be cleaned up. This can't be like, made pretty, it can't be like palatable. This had to be what it is. And it had to attack your conscience, That was very intense. I mean, we kind of carried on the community work for a while, but it was just like, I'm not a social worker. I'm an artist. And I think this is also the other problem that happens with a lot of South African artists in particular. We get like guilt-ridden into actually doing social work and doing the, like I get asked about AIDS all the time. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, what the fuck can I do? I'm like one person. I'm not the fucking government. I don't have resources. All I have, like, wow, how's fucking artwork going to change any of this? And I think, and that's the thing. It's just like, we kind of like, and I think it's a hangover from the manner, from the way in which we made art in the past, because when we made art during apartheid, it was important that all the work spoke to that. And so, we don't take pleasure in just normalcy, like pretty things. I have students that were like crying, recently, because they were like, I'm so tired of being told I'm a Black woman. I'm like, can't I just be? And I'm like, that's exactly what you're supposed to be. Just be. You like fuck all other than yourself. Like, don't the fucking categories make they're irrelevant. Just say you're an artist, that's it. And pretty is political. Just fucking be, and because that's the ultimate freedom. Freedom is fucking being whatever you want to be. You're not subscribing to tradition, to culture, to race, to gender, to all of these fucking categories. Those are man-made. That's you. When you fucking pop on your mommy's pussy, nobody tells you who the fuck you are. You socialize into those programs, So so it's like also like how to kind of move away from that into a space that's also just like, where we can take pleasure. Because, we always kind of like, if it's not fucking apartheid, then it's GBV, then it's, oh no, it's AIDS, then it's GBV, then it's this, then it's like, for fuck's sake, can't we fix shit so we can just enjoy life? Just take fucking pleasure. I just want to look at a painting sometimes and just be stupid,
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's just like, have fun, have pleasure in life. Fucking life is so amazing. We got an amazing fucking planet. That's the thing I'm pissed off about now. It's like, just when I get my shit together, there's some fucking wild ass white motherfucker in Europe, in the north, like fucking trying to blow shit up again. Like, this is his fucking property. This is our earth. It's our fucking earth. Not an option. This is it.
Amen. Preach
This
it.
is ours. Nobody owns this but us. This is us. We can't fucking believe this. Leaders don't exist. Leaders are just assholes with fucking access to power. Nobody fucking owns you. The only person that probably owns you is your mother. That's the only person you're going to be worried about. Nobody else.
So we've almost come to the end of time, and I really feel like I need another day. But I do want
hours.
Well, I'll have to invite you for coffee next time I'm in Joburg. So, but I do want to open it up to one or two other people that may be interested to ask a quick question. So, if you can maybe just raise your hand or something like that, so that I can know who you know who I need to unmute, because I don't know how to globally unmute everybody. So I'll just, or what I'll do is I'll just actually randomly, or not randomly, I'll just say unmute for everybody. So if you do please just pop your hand or unmute yourself and ask. Any questions? Any last comments? So I think that I don't see anything in the chat either. So I'm going to assume that everybody is happy and everybody agrees with you that the world needs to be safe so we can just have more fun. But maybe Lorraine, you can unmute yourself.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. I know that I know that the press for time situation, and I feel like this question I've been gearing to ask feels a bit, it feels like I don't know how to call it, like a letdown at the end of this powerful session we've had, but thank you very much for the opportunity, Tracey. I was wondering if you have any advice to students or emerging artists regarding performance art and the intimate involvement of your body in your art.
Oh shit! Don't do it. The thing, you're not going to survive off of performance art. That's the thing, because it's like so niche. I mean, a lot of people are doing it now because it's really a fantastic medium, like to push the parameters of self-expression and freedom of expression, and also just, you know, like adjusting people's sensibilities. You know, it's like I said to students, like you know, if a law student walks around butt naked on campus, you know, somebody's gonna call security. If it's an art student, everybody's gonna be like, oh, it's an art student, it's fine. You know, and so like understanding like the parameters of what that is just fantastic. I mean, like, you know, like if you got body issues, all of that shit disappears. It's like so amazing, and it's pretty addictive. You know, it's really addictive because it's, you know, I call like also performance art theater for adrenaline junkies. You know, because once you do it, you know, and then you kind of get that kick of like, wow, if I do this, I'm not getting arrested. I'm like pushing. I mean, you've got to also make sure that you do your research. You know, there's certain countries that you can't do certain shit. I mean, I always make sure that I do my research before, you know, I go to places, because yeah, I don't want to lose my life. I'm not suicidal anymore. I always had suicidal missions before. I mean, I think when Chris Vessels and I went to Israel, Palestine to do that piece where I urinated on the wall while playing the Israeli national anthem on electric guitar, long story. But like, I think that was a suicide mission. And I mean, I was suicidal back then, so I didn't give a fuck if I lived or died. But Chris loves life. But he was just like, he just thought it was an adventure. So, but, you know, and I think that a lot of the time there's a lot of superficial like gestures that people are just kind of, you know, I mean, it's just like performance art is just like, you've kind of got to go to sort of like the origins of it as well, to see like historically who actually did it, who started doing it, and why. And I mean, for me, like I got like these markers of like sort of virtual mentors in a sense, of people that whose practices have affected me. So I mean, I like the work of Vito Acconci. which is like sort of pretty macho. I quite like, I kind of veer more to like male artists a lot of the time, like in terms of performance, because I find that they push harder than a lot of, like, I think like a lot of, I think, yeah, okay, Abramovich, but I mean, like, I feel like she's kind of caught up in a femininity in a way, like she hasn't transcended the body. And I feel like part of what performance art needs to do is do that. And I mean, in my mind, I'm like beyond female when I'm doing performance. You know, people still see me as a female form, but I'm not seeing that. You know, I'm thinking sculpturally. I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking of a and I'm not even thinking of it theatrically or in terms of dance. I'm actually thinking like a sculptor. You know, I'm thinking about also like the aesthetics of it, like how this would translate into a 2D medium. So I'm thinking about it in a painting fashion as well. It's like, okay, so how is this going to look good as a video, as a photograph, as a, you know, like how, you know, also just and you know, and I think there's because I suppose the one piece of advice would be never lose sight of the fact that it's an artwork, that you an artwork, that what you're doing in that moment is you're practicing on. If you were in a studio and this was a canvas and a painter and a paintbrush, and you know, instead of like your tools are different. Your tools are now your body, but you can translate all of those practices into the body. Do you know what I mean? So you never stop thinking about yourself. Just don't think of yourself as even human. You know, you've got to transcend it. You've got to transcend all of that. And that's the thing. I mean, we talk about vibration in the beginning, and that to me is like when shit starts to happen. It's like I can feel the vibrational difference. Like I start to, it's almost like I go into a trance. Like I lose form. Like the body becomes an object in space that is doing whatever it needs to do in order to shift, you know, the frequency and the vibration of the space around and affect the audience. So it's like, okay, so, you know, in the same way that you'd expect to do it if you're contemplating a painting. But the only thing is now, like the pre-production with the performance artwork is the most important thing, because you basically, your pre-prod is 100%, okay, but it's only 50% of the work, because the other 50% of the work happens when you make the work. So before you make the work, you plan the shit out of it. You go and you do a recce, like you think militaristically. You're like, okay, so I'm gonna have people working here. This is gonna happen. Okay, so is this legal? Can I do this here? What are the parameters? Maybe you can talk to somebody that's around if it's in a public space. And I usually like the confines of the museum and the gallery because they're safe spaces. The minute you're out in public, you're like, okay, so I always like say to the students who are doing like public performances, I'm like, make sure you got a camera person with you, whether they're holding stills or a video camera, because when people see that, they think, oh, there's a movie going on, oh, this is a documentary, or they think about it differently. So at least your immediate space is secure, you're safe, because you've got to think of safety first, you know. And then also like you know, a lot of what I found in the beginning was that people were actually dabbling with like spiritual stuff when they were doing it. And I kind of made the mistake of doing it too. And then it was like, no. This is art. This is not like a temple. This is like, you know, leave sacred things in sacred places, because you don't want to be conjuring and picking up stuff that's not yours, you know. And I think that's also like part of the conversation that needs to sort of happen, most particularly in this country, maybe less on the rest of the continent. But because I've walked into spaces where students are bringing, you know, traditional and ancestral practices into the art space, which is really fucking dangerous. Because like I'm walking home with other people, you know, like, you know, you don't call up your ancestors in an art gallery. Like what for? You know, that's a dirty environment. You know, you don't use those things. I mean, it's also, it's like it becomes not just voyeuristic, but it's I mean, beyond the sort of disrespect of what that is, you know, in terms of, you know, so you've got to kind of also separate that. But art is not a spiritual practice. You come close to it, but until you go through the shamanistic rituals and go in your initiations and go to seminary and do all of those things, you are not there. You're just a person making shit. That's all you are. You know, and you're channeling stuff, but you also need to know how to self-protect, because what happens is you pick up things that aren't yours when you start to open those portals, because it's magic. I mean, this is what people were doing before. I mean, this is neo-shamanism. performance art is in its essence neo-shamanism, you know, because you're dealing with energy. And the thing is, because it's a relatively new practice, there's not a lot of conversation or discourse or criticality around it in the way that it should be, and most especially on the continent, because, you know, the history. I mean, when I see like other performance artists that I've worked with from other parts of Africa, they have a less, I would say like almost like spiritually detrimental aspect to the work than we do. Because there's something that's happened here that also hasn't happened, you know. And I think it is around the kind of conversation and the education and the information, you know. But like I find their work a lot more gentle, but also a lot of the my thoughts was that a lot of the work that happened in Africa that's been considered African art were actual ritual objects. So the sort of the rituals around the objects and the practices of performance that were also ritualistic were easily translated because there wasn't such a break between those components in a sense. There's some, I don't know, I haven't really figured it out just yet. If you do, let me know. But like it's a lot more kind of engaged and considered than I find here. I find performance art here a lot more reckless and also a lot kind of boring in some ways because it's not rigorous enough. Because people are I think are like enjoy the audacity of it, you know.
That's incredible feedback. Thank you so much. I learned so much from you today, but also with your feedback regarding this. I think it actually has a cause and effect. Like it makes me relook and re-examine my own preconceived experiences, if I could put it like that, of performance art.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, I see there's someone else's hand also up, so I don't want to take too much time.
Guillermo Gomez Pena. I'm gonna type his name here. Oh God, I was Guillermo. I don't think I spelled it right. He is an incredible performance artist. He's like, and he summarizes what it is so well. And he's done this performance art, this lecture on performance art, and it's a performance lecture. You know, I'll send Andre a link if you can't find it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
I know we're pushing for time, but I have to let Bontle ask her question. So Bontle, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Go.
Hi Tracey, sorry for taking everyone's time. Thank you for today's talk. That was, yeah. I have a simple question, but it might like open a can of worms, and if it does, you don't have to answer the question. I guess, how do you free yourself, your body from the politics, or if you do even? Because I grapple with that in a personal sense, and your work is something I resonate to a lot, but I guess, yeah, how do you free yourself from the politics of it all? Sorry, I'm crying.
How do I feel myself in the politics of it? Is that what you asked?
From the politics of it all.
Free myself. Sorry, I didn't get you correct. You said free.
Free.
Oh. No, I don't. I don't think. I mean, I think there's the illusion that I am. I don't think anybody does. I think everything's political and charged and stuff. So I think it's just like simplifying it. That's the easiest thing, is just to, because otherwise it's overwhelming when you're thinking about all of these things. I mean, what I do, which is like my little like romantic moment whenever I make a work, I'm like, I want this work to change the world. And it's like intention, you know, it's like it's the intention is like a magic spell or the wish that you put on the work so that, you know, it does something, and then it automatically, it's almost like all the spells combine, and all the spirit, everything just comes together, and it just helps you make the work even. But I don't know, there's like a weird like testing period that's incredibly hard to get through. And for me, like the work chases me, and this is what I'm saying. Like when it's almost like a download. And this is what I said. Like this guy Billy Carson, you've got to like Google him. He's African American dude. He's like, yeah, he's like done all this research about ancient Kemet and kind of connected stuff. And anyway, I'll write his name here so that you can. There's some stuff of his on YouTube, and he was saying that when people say that they're downloading, they actually are downloading. It's that frequency of like information, that you're opening yourself up to. And it's like, and I think, I mean, in the last while, I've been trying to figure out like what actually is the battlefield like all along. And I was like, oh, fuck, what it is and what it's always been. And this is what a friend of mine said to me at the beginning of lockdown, is that it's like the suppression, the rise of the divine feminine. And I mean, this is not feminism. I'm not talking feminism and I'm not talking gender. I'm talking about like energy, because we're both masculine and feminine energies, all of us, irrespective of what our biology is, right? And so there's an imbalance because the masculine has not been very divine, for the past, few millennia, actually. And then I kind of had an epiphany that was like, okay, so what happened in ancient Kemet, I kind of like also do my spiritual downloads, which I've learned to separate, was like, but then I have to go and do the research after I get it. It's like, okay, so the African woman was God, and then because she gave life, and the priest class decided they wanted to take over. Now, I'm also not sure if it was even in Africa this happened, or if it happened in Samaria. But like at some point there was this disconnect where the female energy, or the female biology became like problematic. The menstrual blood was no more magical. It was, in a force of life. It was dirty. The female body had to be covered out. A whole, female circumcision. The labia is like filthy. You gotta cut off, all of the shit. And so what's happened globally is that imbalance, because anywhere you go in the world, like it's actually like females that are treated like shit more than anyone. That's kind of like the bottom line. And so, and most especially mothers, just by the way, especially single mothers. But anyway, yeah. And it was like even like things in our language, right? So like in Christianity, the right side is the male side, it's the God side, it's the correct side. Even in the English language, and a lot of like European right is correct. Things ergonomically are designed for the right hand. You open the door with the right hand, the scissors. So, and then the left is leftovers. When the left is supposed to be the feminine side, and the heart's located there. Now you go to some other culture, apparently it's the opposite way around. But for my argument, for the period I'm in right now, this is what I'm saying. And it's like, okay, so the heart's on the feminine side, and the left always gets vilified. And so we, so even like kind of like we like at the most basic kind of level, like language. I mean, the funny thing is, a lot of this is also like non-indigenous, because indigenous peoples don't have like pronouns. Like indigenous language. It's like I was saying to somebody that was like, I'm like, fuck pronouns. I mean, that's like so fucking. Everything in Europe is like, your car's female, your whatever, the bed is male, whatever the fuck, like, because but it's like in Zulu,
yeah,
there's no, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so that's like an entry level like point. Then let's like go into other languages and be like, where else? Because I mean, Africa was also a matriarchal lineage, right? So it's like, where do we go to like find and redress this in a way where we're not redesigning these languages that are imposed or invented or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, the fact that European languages are riddled with genderized terminology, and then you go into other spaces and other languages where, this never existed. And I'm more interested in those spaces than I am in trying to fix those spaces. you know, and I feel like that's kind of where we need to go, because we're losing memory. But in the process, I think now, you know, we're also finding information and we're distrusting that information because, you know, again, like, you know, that kind of like energetic download is kind of becoming more vital. And so many more people are kind of crossing over, you know, in the last, like, you know, 2 years, we've had so many deaths. Like, you know, what's happening with all of those energies? You know, where they go, they're all around us. They haven't fucking left. They're all around us. You know, so how do we kind of also find new narratives around death? I don't like these current narratives. I don't fucking like them, and I won't subscribe to them because they just don't resonate with me. So like, what does, you know? And then the search goes on, and then we got to go to all these different pools to go and find out like all this information that we lost, you know, that our grandparents were too ashamed to like tell us about because, you know, they weren't Western enough, or, you know, so like, you know, so it's like part of, like, for me, like that point of so-called meditation, I guess. I don't know how to meditate, but I think this is what I do, is meditation, because I get information and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to go and research that, because it's not coming from sources that are prescribed, you know. They're not coming from a book, it's not coming from the internet, it's coming from somewhere else. And it's not my ideas. That's the thing. You know, they're not coming from me. I'm not fucking special. I'm just a conduit, you know? I don't know.
Thank you for that. No, you more than answered my question. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Bontle.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tracey. I'm not going to allow any more questions just because I'm very cognizant of the time. But I just wanted to thank you, Tracey, for a very stimulating conversation. And I think you're going to have to come to the Free State in person and come and hold a week seminar if necessary.
Cool. Yeah.
Colin, I don't know if you just want to add something in closing.
Tracey, wow. I think you've blown all of our minds. Thank you so much. And I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. So I want to thank you, and I really hope that you will. I mirror what Andre's saying. I hope you will consider coming to talk to the Free State artists. They desperately need to hear these conversations. So I just want to say to Andre as well, thank you for holding the space. And I guess I'm going to have to say thank you to Patsawani Hini and to APSA for making this possible and for giving us this platform to share this wonderful information. I'm so inspired. Let's go and change the world.
Oh, yay. Oh, thank you so much. This was awesome. I really enjoyed myself. Can't wait to come to the OFS.
Awesome.
Cool. You also have an invitation to the Eastern Cape, so
yeah, just tell me, I'll be there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you for those who have stayed to the end, and have a great evening.